Now, the irony is, if that's what's happened, the purpose of marriage is not for me to make a sacrifice, certainly not to change. I've got to find someone who is perfectly compatible, and that means somebody who accepts me as I am, somebody who affirms me, somebody who helps me get to my goals. That's the and also somebody with whom I have this great sexual, romantic relationship, because the whole purpose of marriage is fulfillment, personal, individual self-fulfillment. And if that doesn't work, if that's not what's ahead of me, I'm not going to that marriage. And if I'm in a marriage and that stops happening, then I'm out. Here's the problem, and this is my main point. That approach puts more pressure on marriage than the Bible puts on it, or any traditional culture has ever put on marriage. It puts tremendous pressure on marriage. It says marriage has to provide something that the Bible doesn't say it should provide, and nobody else has ever said it should provide until now. Why? Because think. Who do you have to find for a me marriage? Class? Who do you have to find? First of all, somebody who doesn't think there's anything wrong with you, hardly. Because you don't want them to come in and change you, okay? But that means, of course, that you've got to find somebody that you don't particularly want to change much either. There shouldn't be a great deal of conflict, and there has to be this desire constantly to jump into bed. It has to be absolutely, completely natural. I've got a lot of statistics that say it's exactly what everybody says they have to be. Do you realize what that means? No wonder nobody can find anybody like that, because there's nobody like that out there. Secondly, no wonder there's a lot of cohabitation, because people say, well, at least I'd like to have sex with somebody, but I don't want to give myself to someone like that unless they have to be totally low maintenance. They've got to be constantly not trying to change me. But let's just say this. If you put on top of the culture's view of marriage, which is self-fulfillment, compatibility, soulmate, don't change me, and on top of that, you try to make it virtuous by saying, oh, and I want to marry a Christian too. In other words, if you've imbibed the values of the culture, and what you say, if you're men, but there's not too many of you out there right now, but if the men say, oh, I want to marry a Christian, but she's got to be absolutely gorgeous, and she can't change me. And if the women just pick up what the culture says, I want to marry a guy, but he's got to really be quite a provider. He's got to really have a great job. I got to really know I'm going to be living pretty nicely and be able to raise children and have no problem sending them to private school and all that stuff. In other words, if you imbibe the culture's incredibly self-centered me marriage, and then you put on top of it the me marriage concept, and then you put on top of it, oh, and I want to marry a Christian, you're never going to find anybody. Or, if you do, and you get married, and as soon as you find it's incredibly hard, really hard, you're going to say, I married the wrong person.